On Larry King Now, Grammy winner Faith Evans is back with the Notorious B.I.G.
A lot of people consider Big the king of the rap game, the king of New York or what have you. So it was kind of a deference to him, you know. I'm just kind of adding myself to his greatness. We spent a lot of time hoping that the authorities would bring someone to, to responsibility. And after a while, you realize that that's probably not going to happen.
They can't prove it?
I'm pretty sure it can be proven.
Why wouldn't they?
That's the question. There are a lot of things that when we become wiser, we're like, okay, yeah, maybe I would have approached it differently, but quite honestly, I don't know if I would be, made of the same Teflon that I am had I done things differently.
Plus, person you trade places with for a day.
I would trade places with J-Lo for a day. I just want her butt.
It's all next on Larry King Now. Welcome to Larry King Now. Our special guest is Faith Evans, the multi-platinum selling, multi-Grammy Award-winning artist, songwriter, and producer, New York Times best-selling author, and entrepreneur. Faith has sold more than 18 million albums worldwide, and her long-awaited duets album with her late husband, Notorious B.I.G., called The King and I, will be out May 19th. Why The King and I?
Well, once I started pursuing the deal to do this record, it just really kind of came to me. And I think it was just fate that I didn't have to think hard about the title. I mean, a lot of people consider Big the king of the rap game, the king of New York or what have you. So it was kind of a deference to him, I'm just kind of adding myself to his greatness.
And he was killed 20 years ago.
Yes.
Why this duet album now?
Well, actually, this album, the thought to do something like this was inspired by when I heard Natalie Cole's Unforgettable. I told his mom back then that it would be really great if I could do something like that one day. But I never moved on that thought. And then my attorney actually reminded me a few years ago, like, maybe you should try and pursue, the business situation and actually do that album you thought about doing. So, if it weren't for my attorney, who knows when I would have actually thought about it again. But it wasn't necessarily planned to be released this year. I was really promoting it to be out early last year. But as things would turn out, I went on tour. I started getting different features on the album and, working on other people's schedule. We ended up going into this year, so.
I knew Natalie very well, and that, of course, Unforgettable turned out to be great. It was one single. Then they later did a couple of others in an album. Is it difficult to do technically?
It's not, it wasn't for me. It wasn't at all because, Pro Tools, which is just kind of allows you to just kind of splice stuff, whereas back in the day we actually had to cut tapes and wait hours.
But he's singing rap, right?
Yes, he's rapping.
You're not rapping, are you?
I am on some songs. I got to pull out some of my hidden talents. I'm beatboxing on one of them, actually.
Now, his things have already been heard, right? As it were, Nat King Cole's was a famous record.
Most of them. I do have some vocals of his on here that are unheard vocals. So there are a few surprises on there, And even the way that I use the vocals of his that people are familiar with, I kind of rearrange them into totally different songs where you think you expect it to go one place, but it takes a turn in a totally different direction.
Yeah, his name was Christopher Wallace, right?
Yes.
How did he come up with Notorious B.I.G.?
Well, from what I understand, a lot of people referred to him as Biggie Smalls early on, and which was a character in Uptown Saturday Night with the Bill Cosby and Sidney Poitier movie. I think there was another artist that had already recorded under that name, so he had to record under another name.
Even though it was his name.
Right. So Big, I think because they used to call him Biggie in his neighborhood, they just kind of shortened it to Big, and maybe Puff added on the Notorious. I really don't know.
You married him quickly, right? I mean, it
was
not a long engagement.
It wasn't. I don't know if there actually was an engagement. We married a couple of months after we met. Legend has it that it was 8 days, but I recently heard an interview of his where he was saying 8 days, but I'm pretty positive he was talking about 8 days after he said, "I want to marry you," which is still a short time in terms of 2 months, 8 days.
Where'd you meet?
We met at a photo shoot for Puff's new artist that was signed to his label. So he didn't know I was actually an artist signed to the label, and we just kind of met, and he asked me for a ride home, and I took him and his friends home, and I think we bonded over the jokes and our senses of humor immediately.
Do you have a song on the album called 10 Wife Commandments?
I do.
They're your commandments or his?
You know what? I think it's fair to say that the commandments in my song, 10 Wife Commandments, are a combination of things that I either already knew and applied to my 2 past marriages, or things that I learned that I should have applied. So to be quite honest, there may be some things that should be on that list that are not. But in trying to be clever and witty and kind of go along with his song to some extent as well, I think there's still 10 things that men and women both can appreciate.
Now, you also have a duet with Lil Kim, right?
I do.
On the same album.
I do.
How did that work?
Well, Lil Kim and I were on the Bad Boy reunion tour together, and I had actually reached out to her to do a record a few albums ago, and it just didn't happen because of scheduling. And I never never imagined it would be on an album with Big and I that we would actually end up working together. So when I was doing the tour, when we were rehearsing for the tour, I asked her, like, would you be interested in doing this record, which I don't have yet, but I told her this whole concept for the album, and she said yes right away. And by the time we were halfway through the tour, I had the song that I thought was the perfect one. And I told her, like, I really want you to express how you felt for him and how his passing affected her,
A lot of fans wanted you and Kim to do something together, right?
Yes. Yes, I know they've been waiting for it.
And I hear that Biggie's mother was involved?
Well, not only is Miss Wallace and Big's kids, Tiana and CJ, they're all co-executive producers on the album. But I had when I was finally putting the sequence together and putting the story of because the album is pretty much a story of our relationship. I was looking on YouTube for different pieces of people talking about our relationship, and then I realized I had a bunch of video footage, personal stuff with his mom talking about us, and I said, what would be great? I'll just take this stuff, put music beds under it, and make them into actual interludes. So she didn't actually go in the studio to record, but she was, when I told her I'm using your vocals on the album, and she was like, well, am I going to get my publishing? So her first question was about business, which is a good thing.
Why does your late husband, 20 years later, still remain so relevant?
Well, I don't even know if there's a way to put it into words other than saying greatness is just what it is, His greatness speaks for itself, like even in being in New York, which I'm not in New York every year on March 9th, which is the date that he passed. This year was probably the second year in those 20 years that I was there, and it's like a whole different. It's a holiday. I mean, and although it's not a day that I tend to want to celebrate, but it was actually a good feeling to be there this year. The Brooklyn Nets actually celebrated. They gave a Biggie night where they retired a jersey in his honor, and it was just so great to see his mother, experience that and see the feeling that people continue to have. It's like, it almost feels like the people that know him from his music have the same love for him that those of us that knew him personally. It's really crazy when I see it and actually experience things like that,
Our guest is Faith Evans. More on her life and music, the album The King and I. Will be right back. We're back with Faith Evans. The album The King and I with her late husband, Notorious B.I.G, will be out May 19th. Is it true that you felt Biggie's presence at one point during the recording?
Here's the thing. I grew up, I'm a very spiritually connected person in terms of, I believe in God, I pray, but I'm not like super deep and superstitious, and into supernatural stuff as, on the surface. So throughout the recording, I was so surprised at just how it was coming together that I don't think I necessarily had an emotional reflection. But then at one point when I was pretty much done recording and I was playing the music for different people who hadn't heard the album, I just kind of felt like a tap on my shoulder. It was really crazy. And I went around to every person in the room who worked on the album and said, oh my God, thank you. Although I know I probably said it every day when we left the studio, but something told me to go and talk to them each. And I just was like, I think that was him. And I just kind of started bawling, crying, and had to get myself together. I didn't want people to think something was wrong. I'm like, okay, I had to go outside and, take deep breaths and just pull it together. But I honestly felt that it was just, I felt it was him just telling me to say thank you and saying I'm proud of what you're doing.
You got married after he died, right?
Yes, I did get married after he died. I was married for 14 years. I've been divorced for about 3 years now.
How many children do you have?
I have 4 kids.
But you had one son with Big, right?
I did, CJ.
How old is he now?
CJ is 20. He'll be 21 later this year.
How does he feel about this album?
He hasn't heard every song. He heard a few records, but there's a song on the album that I initially wanted him to be featured on because he does music as well. All of my kids do music, and I don't know if he was ready to kind of touch that place emotionally, because initially he said yes, then he was like, I don't know if I want to do it, and then I rearranged the song to still be about him thematically, without him on it, and I did play it back for him, and he just kind of shook his head like, that's kind of tight, with a smile,
He's in the music business too?
Well, he's actually in the film business. He's an actor. He's been in 3 films, but he does do music.
He was killed tragically, right? A drive-by shooting?
Yes.
Never solved?
Unsolved.
Do you think it was a purposeful drive-by shooting or an accidental drive-by shooting? No idea?
We absolutely believe it was purposeful.
You don't have any suspect?
Well, being that we are not the authorities, the legal authorities, his mom and I have been, it's been years since we actually were in a courtroom, but, there was a time when we spent a lot of time, a lot of dollars, just kind of trying to fight, or not even fight for justice, pretty much, and hoping that the authorities would bring someone to, to responsibility. And after a while, you realize that that's probably not going to happen. Although we do believe they know what happened. We believe we know what happened, but it's not up to us as his family to...
They can't prove it?
I'm pretty sure it can be proven.
If they know what happened.
It can be proven, but...
Why wouldn't they?
That's the question. That's the question,
Where did the crime occur?
The crime occurred in Los Angeles.
Was he walking on the street?
He was driving. He was in a car in the passenger side, in the front seat.
Oh, and the next car pulled up next to him?
Yep. They were stopped at a light, and a car pulled up. But, a lot of evidence points to it having been very much planned out. But, like I said, we are not the legal authorities that have the right to say, hey, you did it, and we think they did it. We've spent time in hoping that would happen,
Did he must have died instantly?
Well, he was taken to the hospital. When I got to the hospital, because I got to the hospital probably within 30 minutes to an hour of him actually getting there, he was already gone. But I was told that they tried to revive him, so I'm assuming that
he was alive.
He was either alive or trying to fight for his life.
Up next, we'll talk about Faith's dream collaboration, who'd she trade places with for a day, the album The King and I, and we'll be right back. We're back with Faith Evans. We're looking forward to that collaboration album with Notorious B.I.G. It's called The King and I. You describe your music as incorporating jazz, gospel, and hip-hop. How do you do that?
You know what? I don't know how, but I can tell you I grew up singing in the church from the age of 2, probably since I could talk. And
where'd you grow up?
In Newark, New Jersey. I grew up and I sang in church, and then once I got in elementary school, I was actually the lead singer with the jazz band in my school. So I started, learning jazz records. My mom actually was the only black singer in this white pop, country, folk band in Florida, which is where my family is originally from. So she had all these different records, so I used to listen to everything from Mamas and the Papas to Steely Dan to Earth, Wind and Fire. So a culmination of all of those things.
And you got famous in your early 20s, right?
I did.
Did you have an early hit record?
I did. My first album was, I think, certified platinum. I had a couple of gold or platinum singles off my first album. Unexpectedly. I mean, I obviously knew that it felt right to be signed to Bad Boy Records, but I had no idea how far it would go.
Are you surprised how mainstream hip-hop has become?
Right now, I can't say I'm surprised that hip-hop being so mainstream because I was there to witness, I think, the onset of
Your
it.
husband may have been one of the pioneers, right?
Right. So I'm not surprised. I'm actually, I'm happy that it is still popular. It's, it would be great if there was a lot more musicality in it now. But, I mean, as a creative person, I definitely know not to judge other people's creative expression. I get it, but, I do appreciate musicality.
Independent artists, though, you worry about streaming and what's going on in the record industry?
I was independent for 3 albums. This new project is on a major label, but to be quite honest, I can't say that I think about those things either way, although they affect things, but it's not something that I can single-handedly change.
Okay, we play a little game of If You Only Knew. I just throw some questions at you.
Okay.
What's your guilty pleasure?
Ratchet TV.
Who was your childhood celebrity crush?
My childhood celebrity crush, that would be a tie between Michael Jackson and El DeBarge.
Person you trade places with for a day?
I would trade places with J-Lo for a day. I just want her butt.
Something on your bucket list?
Something on my bucket list would be to take my children on a European vacation.
You could do that.
I could.
Do you have a dream collaboration?
My dream collaboration would be, I have to say either of these two legends, Stevie Wonder or Anita Baker.
Secret talent?
This is so gross.
What can you do?
My secret talent, other than beatboxing, is I'm a champion spitter. That's so ladylike, right?
You can spit 2 sewers?
I used to think that I wanted to be a tomboy when I was in elementary school, and I hung out with all these boys, and we caught the bus together. We used to have like wrestling and spitting contests, and I used to always win the spitting contest. So.
Hey, so what's something you'd like to learn?
Something I'd like to learn is to scat like Ella Fitzgerald.
The best.
Mm-hmm.
Ella and Mel Torme once, on a Grammy Award, scat sang together, 11-minute song.
Ooh, I gotta look that up.
Musician or band your fans would be surprised to know you listen to?
Well, I don't know if it would be such a surprise because I've said it, but I listen to a lot of Michael Franks and Mamas and the Papas. And
Strangest job you've had?
The only job I've had before my singing career was a checkout girl at a grocery store in my neighborhood.
Were you good?
I got fired, so I don't know how good I was.
What are you awful at?
I am awful at handwriting, coloring, anything that requires a steady hand.
You don't stay in between the lines?
Yeah, I'm kind of a lefty, not a great lefty.
What do people get wrong about you?
I think people get wrong about me the fact that they think I'm super serious and, they don't really get that I have a great sense of humor unless they actually get to spend personal time with me.
Is there something you'd long believed to be true and realized wasn't?
Wow. Well, I must say that I grew up in church, and not so much that it's an untruth, but I did realize once I was doing secular music, which growing up people kind of shunned on in the church. They looked down on that like it's devil's music. But I realized that I actually touched a lot of people's lives, since I have been in the secular music world. So, yeah, that's kind of I wouldn't say a myth, but, something I discovered to be different than I believe.
And tell me something people don't know about you.
Something people don't know about me, I'm a great cook. And I actually scrub my walls quite often with bleach and Fabuloso.
Wow. See, we learned a lot. Faith will answer your social media questions in our final segment. The album is The King and I. It drops May 19th. We'll be right back. We're back with Faith Evans. She's back in a big way with The King and I, out May 19th, collaborating with Notorious B.I.G., her late husband, who passed away 20 years ago. A couple of social media questions. Denver Boot Jr., what's your opinion of Suge Knight's recent claim about the murder of Tupac?
Oh, wow. I was quite shocked to see I saw little like headlines on blogs, but I don't know if I quite saw the source or
He
where it
said
came
that
from.
Reggie Wright Jr., do you know who
Now,
that is?
I've heard the name, and actually in some of our different, court legal situations, I've heard that name. Was he a police officer or something?
Reggie Wright Jr. and his ex-wife, Sharitha, were behind the murder.
Oh, wow. I mean, I was quite surprised to hear that. I mean, it's interesting, and I guess I'm just as interested as everyone else to see where it actually
Have
leads.
they ever publicly named a suspect in your husband's death?
Never publicly, no.
But you know it.
Privately, sort of.
Michael Rangel via Facebook, are there things in your life you would change if you could?
Well, I think that's kind of a twofold answer because, there are a lot of things that when we become wiser, we're like, okay, maybe I would have approached it differently. But quite honestly, I don't know if I would be, made of the same Teflon that I am had I done things differently.
I would never have started smoking.
You know what? Yeah, that's very true. I think I had a little
stint.
stint.
If I had to do a day over, it would be
I
that
got
day.
you.
Michael Rangel also asks, have you ever thought about starting a singing club in an inner city school? I think music bonds people and heals people.
I actually have thought about, with the thoughts on how music isn't so much in schools, and it was so heavy when I was coming up. I remember going to our local theater, and actually seeing Nina Simone when I was in 5th grade. I didn't realize how big a deal it was, but thinking back, I realized all the teachers were so excited.
A lot of creative arts have been cut, funding has been cut.
Yeah, and I talk about, maybe being able to do something like that, even if it's starting by just visiting, some of the school systems and having a day. I used to enjoy stuff like that too when we had assemblies and popular people would come by and sing a song or two or just say a few words, So I'm very much interested in doing something like that.
Life as Luke wants to know if you'd want to do more work with Lil Kim in the future.
I would love to. I mean, maybe we can do something for her next album. I would love to. I'm not opposed to that at all.
You say that your own sense of faith is what has gotten you through. What role does it play in your life today?
It plays the same role it has played from the time I can remember. I mean, I'm certainly glad that the values I have picked up from, my upbringing and my grandmother and my mom and just the whole spiritual part, whether it was in church or in a synagogue, wherever it was that, that you go. I just do believe that it's nice to be nice. And that's a part of my faith. It's good to be well-liked. I mean, that doesn't mean you have to be stepped on and stepped over, but I think I've been able to apply the fact that I know God has my back. He has me here for a reason. I never knew I was going to be a recording artist. So for me to, see how things have unfolded, it's like, okay, I'm glad that I had the faith to know that there's a reason I'm here and not be overwhelmed by all of these different things that have taken place in my life and career and kind of allow it. Some of these things would have allowed some people to lose their mind, but I'm like, well, no. I know there has to be a reason that I'm dealing with things the way I am and able to still be here and have somebody even care about what I have to say, You're
a terrific lady.
Thank you. And you are as well. Thank you.
Thanks to my guest, Faith Evans. The King and I is out May 19th. You can always find me on Twitter @KingsThings, and I'll see you next time.